me offer just a few suggestions for us on how to deal with difficult situations and people that we might deal with during this season. You know, the first one is don't try to reason with the unreasonable people. There are going to be unreasonable people. What was Jesus' strategy? He stayed silent. He said, it's not worth my breath, not worth wasting my time to get into the empty accusations and the meaningless confrontations. When you bite the bait, you're hooked and you're stuck. He said, I'm just going to avoid that. It's very wise to create healthy boundaries for yourself, to say, there are just some topics, we're not going to go there. We're not going to talk politics at dinner. We're not going to do this when we gather for Thanksgiving. We're not going to talk about that issue or that time or that person. We're not going to talk about this person beyond the back. Maybe you just create some healthy boundaries. And you might need to speak some of those out to other people. Say, hey, by the way, this is off limits for us. You know, so maybe you need to share with some people, this is a boundary for me. This is an off limits thing. Or maybe when they bring something up, you just say, I prefer not to talk about that. Or you can just look at the person and say, that's interesting. How about the Bears? How about, whoever your team is, make up a team. Get real interested in the next 2 days so you can change the topic, right? Whatever it is, just switch the topics. And you can say, man, I'd prefer not to. And if they keep pressing the issue, say, I'm not comfortable with this. I don't want to talk this. I'm going to go over here. Because there are ways to handle that. And it's not always easy. Another thing we witness that Jesus does is he responds instead of reacting. He chooses not to react, but instead to respond. And if you're wondering what the difference is, well, a reaction is often impulsive, while a response is often planned. Now, some of you, this is just your natural way of responding. You are one of those calm people who processes before you speak. Some of you are wired like me. And you're just gonna, like whatever happens, it just comes out. So if that's you gotta pause and then choose to calmly plan your thought. Reactions are typically aggressive, while responses are typically calm. A reaction is typically defensive, while the response is inquisitive. Instead of a it's a Right? Reactions are often destructive. They're swinging the axe and chopping it down. You grab it and you just start swinging too, and then everything's falling apart at that point. But a response is constructive. Instead of how do we tear this thing down, you're asking, how can we build this up? And a reaction is often responding to an attack on you. So you attack back. But attacking back never solves the issue, never gets to a good place. It only makes for more attacks. So instead of doing that, I encourage you, find a way to respond. Just count to 5, and while you're counting to 5, remind yourself that your worth, your value is not wrapped up into what this other person says of you or how this conversation goes. And then determine that you will learn their perspective, that you want to be curious. So trade curiosity for what would have been fear. Choose compassion instead of judgment. And then actually listen to them. Search for the common ground and ask questions. Now, don't ask questions like, oh yeah? Well, who do you think you are? That's not a good question to ask at Thanksgiving. But ask a question maybe like, that's interesting. Well, tell me about some of your life experiences that have led you to that point. Oh, can you tell me more about that? And if you calmly respond with a question, that tends to bring their calm into it as well. And then ask another question and another question, another question. Because what happens is the more we listen and the more we ask questions, the more we earn the right to speak. But when we just shout back, let me tell you, church, there's been too much shouting from the kingdom of God, and shouting at a culture that already doesn't agree does not earn us the right to be heard. It does not earn us the place to speak. It just gets us labeled and dismissed. But if we will listen and ask and find common ground, we earn the right to speak into the situation. And there is going to come a time for all those people we interact with when eventually the bad day comes their way, suffering comes barging into their house, and they will begin asking questions. They'll begin seeking advice. And what determines whether they choose Instagram or TikTok or YouTube or the news or some other group of people in their world, or if they choose you, is whether or not you have earned the right to speak into their life. So let's do our best to earn the place to speak into their life. And when we get the opportunity to speak in their life, let's make sure we do our best to speak winsomely about Jesus.